Good day. This is dramatic pause, the morning meeting. Thank you for joining. Sean, Dan, and I are excited to have you here. Whether you're watching on YouTube or on the two-way platform, you've come to the right place. If you want to start your day like the pros do, we'll run through the day's events, kick them around a bit as if we know what we're talking about, and then take your questions if and only if you're here on the two-way platform. So if you are here on the two-way platform and you want to ask a question, make a comment, read a horoscope, or tell us what you're having for dinner, please raise your electronic hand and queue up for the opportunity of a lifetime to speak to Dan and Sean. If you're watching on YouTube, fantastic that you've chosen to join us. Please remember our mantra: peace, love, and understanding, the presumption of grace of all for all. Everyone gets two exceptions. Dan, Sean, welcome in. On the day book that I distributed a little earlier today, I left out the signature event of the day because even though I knew it was happening, I forgot to include it. And that is the lighting of the Capitol Hill Christmas tree. Happens tonight. I'm not sure exactly what time, but stay tuned for that. It could happen on our watch on the companion program, two-way tonight, in which case we will take that live. Warning the producers now. Live extended coverage, potentially, the lighting of the Capitol Hill Christmas tree. Dan and Sean,
If you
update us,
want,
please,
if
on
you
your
miss it,
trees.
if you miss
Yeah.
it tonight, well, I
Yeah.
just a quick update. The
Yeah.
lights are now in front of this.
Yeah.
So we've made a step. We pulled the lights out of the shed last night. Tree still doesn't have them, but I was going to offer that if you miss the Capitol lighting tonight, we
Yeah.
could light mine tomorrow morning.
Live on the show?
Yeah. Hey, if the kids
World
get it
exclusive?
tonight,
World
Take
exclusive.
the kids home
exclusive.
from school tomorrow. It's
All right.
great.
Please go on X and weigh in. Would you like, maybe Sean will do a poll. Would you like to see live coverage of the Spicer lighting? Dan, your tree up and running. Any further developments?
There is nothing better than coming down in the morning and smelling the Christmas tree. Plug in the lights, little Christmas music. Best way to start the day.
Dan lives on the Upper West Side, which means his is the only tree within two-mile radius. Anyway, on the day book today, President Biden remains in Angola. He's got a variety of meetings and photo ops, and then he flies home. Very quick trip to Africa, and still not taking any questions on the pardon.
Mark, did anyone look? I will admit, I wanted to do this yesterday, but I know we were talking. I just didn't know. I wonder in the transcript from Air Force One.
Yeah.
I know that she was asked about the pardon, but did she get asked about her role and whether she had lied? Because I can't find that yet. And I still have to see any reporter ask Corinne Jean-Pierre about her specific role.
Yeah. Good question. Don't know the answer to that. Probably not, would be my guess. Yeah. Anyway, everybody get ready. Say it with me. The vice president's schedule. Washington, D.C., where she will receive briefings and conduct internal meetings with staff. These meetings will be, say it with me, closed press. All right. No known events for President Trump or J.D. Vance. On Capitol Hill, besides the all-important Christmas tree lighting, Senate Republicans are spending hours together, closeted in some room in the Library of Congress, strategizing about the year. A particular focus will be what to do about the reconciliation bill and that pesky bird rule that dictates what senators are allowed to vote in a reconciliation package. Meanwhile, on the floor, Chuck Schumer will continue to grind away at trying to confirm as many Biden-nominated judges as possible before the president leaves office. And the House is back in town. As John McLaughlin would say, run for your lives. I forget what he used to say, but Congress is now fully staffed for the day during this lame duck session. And of course, they are grappling with how to deal with the continuing resolution and with the defense spending bill. More on that someday here. All right, guys. Little reporting from me on the Hegseth nomination. First of all, on Capitol Hill yesterday, and there were two, I would say, for most people, unfamiliar but significant faces who are accompanying Pete Hegseth on at least some of his courtesy calls with senators. Let's go to that first photo, please. You can pick which one you do first. Here is, in the center there, Mrs. Hegseth. Sean and I and Dan cannot recall a spouse going with a nominee up to Capitol Hill. Interesting choice. Many believe that is not a cowboy hat. I agree with those. It is not a cowboy hat, but it is a hat. And other photos show her wearing jeans. Not sure I've seen too many people go to courtesy calls wearing jeans. Casual style. Again, interesting choice. Also accompanying Pete Hegseth is his fellow, what do you call people from Minnesota? A land of 10,000 Laker? what do you call them? Minnesotans. His fellow Minnesotan, you see there in the back behind that big head, that is former Minnesota Senator Norm Coleman, who's a very big player in Republican politics. I have yet to figure out exactly what role he is playing, but senators like to show senatorial courtesy to other senators. If I had a nomination and required Senate confirmation, I would welcome a senator coming with me because, again, senators show deference to senators often, not always. Now, here's my reporting. And again, I always try to balance here. I don't want to be gossipy. I don't want to tell you things that aren't true. I have said from the beginning that there would be more revelations about Pete Hegseth's past that have come out. People are focused on the personal allegations, which are very significant, including use of alleged use of alcohol to excess. The questions raised in the New Yorker piece about his financial mismanagement, alleged, of organizations he ran is catching the eyes of Republican senators. And I will tell you today, if you were going to bet on whether this will come to a vote on the floor of the Senate, I would tell you today, based on what I'm hearing from the Republican Senate side, don't count on it. We may see a rerun of what happened with Matt Gaetz, which is Mar-a-Lago is told you have more than 4 Republican senators who will not vote for this nomination. Based on what they know now, they will not be turned. You'd be better off withdrawing it. I believe that could happen. Sean Spicer, what you know about the Hegseth nomination and his wife's role up on the Hill?
Well, as far as Jenny's role, I think it's smart, right? You got initial allegations about interactions with women. It's a public show of support. And I think especially helps, so I think from an image standpoint, it was smart to bring her up there. She's obviously clearly in the camera shot for a reason as they go through the hallways. I think it made a lot of sense. And she's also, just to be clear, Jenny is a very connected person politically through a lot of the shows that she's worked on Fox. So, she has a lot of personal connections. She probably knows some of these members. It's not a bad reinforcement for Pete to do that. Here's the thing that, to your point, Mark, we've talked a lot about the allegations and the innuendo regarding Pete in the women. The management thing is where I think that they could find a new angle and say, well, it's the Department of Defense, it's this huge apparatus, and you could probably find more people willing to discuss management issues on the record than allegations of sexual harassment, sexual whatever, all of that. It's a lot less sexy, but I think that it could potentially give senators a hook where to say, this is billions of dollars that we're talking about. Therefore, I'm concerned about these allegations, and it doesn't look like a redo of Gaetz. So that's the angle that I would watch right now. Is the management aspect of it would be new to them.
You know what the political strategist Arthur Fonzarelli would say about what you just said, Sean? Correctamundo.
Hey,
that is what they're seizing on. They're seizing on those allegations from the New Yorker story. And the fact that they're backed up by some Republicans, even if they're not necessarily MAGA Republicans, is giving Republican senators the ability to say, we're not just going after people on personal allegations. This stuff and the transition is dealing with 2 variables related to those allegations. One is, what did they know and when did they know it? In other words, did they know all about this stuff? And then you've already seen some transition spokespeople say, Pete's done nothing wrong. They've used that phrase, nothing wrong. And I believe because we are all fallible human beings, that's a very bad standard to set.
So I still think that right now, and I said this, and I want to maintain that the standard here is that until something comes out, I think Pete's a very likable guy. He's had a relationship with a lot of these senators because they've been on his programs. Even before that, with some of the longer standing folks, the work that CVA did politically endeared him to a lot of people and the group. So I think Pete's got some really good relationships that can't be understated. That being said, one point that I think is important that I think it's, the part of the help, why the show exists is to give people some insight. There was a very interesting tell a couple days on Fox when they referred to Pete Hegseth as our former colleague. And I think it's important to note that in some of these jobs, especially the ones where you're on air or there's a conflict of interest, the employer will tell you to step down or go away or whatever. And I think that the reason I bring that up is that we said this from the get-go on this. If you are getting nominated for something and there's something in your past that you don't want people to know, understand it's going to come out, and understand that you're putting everything on the line, your personal life, your professional life. And this is one of these points now where they got to go all in. They've got to, they're recognizing, and that's why I think you saw Jenny Hegseth up there today. Yesterday, it made smart sense. It reminded them of the relationships that the Hegseth family writ large has with a lot of these folks. But they're also, I think, to me, it also said, we're all in on this. We know that there's nothing at this point where we've got everything to lose.
Dan, come on in and provide some of that insight that Sean says we offer here on the program.
Oh, I love listening to Republicans talk about one of their own nominees struggling. First off, I look forward to the criticism of her outfit, almost like somebody wore a tan suit a few years ago, and how demeaning that was to the office. Look, it's hard.
I would wear jeans to the Hill. I just don't know people do it regularly.
Yes. It's hard to read the New Yorker story and not cringe. I mean, you can talk about the mismanagement. That's one of them. One of the things I found yesterday really interesting was the way Joni Ernst jumped out in praise of Kash Patel, because I read that a little bit as, I'm going to potentially be no on Hegseth, so I'm going to be really for this other one that the base loves right now. And so I think while the management story the mismanagement story may appeal to some Republican senators as an excuse to be against him, I would not overlook the fact that the sexual harassment allegations are going to also appeal or be of concern to other GOP senators that, may be enough to tank him just right there. So I think he's getting more and more tenuous in his position with every minute.
I think that Dan's point on the Ernst thing was so spot on, because it was like, I want to show you how hardcore I am on some MAGA stuff, because I know that if Hegseth goes down, people are saying I could be the backup, the plan B. Unfortunately, I don't agree with that, but I will tell you that I think Dan's right. But it was so blatant.
Yeah. And it was so unlike
it's so funny. It's so
funny. That's do that very often.
All three of us reached the exact same independent judgment about that. It's hilarious. Doesn't mean we're right, but it probably does. If you want to get in on the conversation, please raise your hand. And Harris supporters and Democrats, not always the same thing these days. Please, we'd love you in the conversation. Please raise your hand. Join us today. Speaking of the Democrats, the Hunter story now, today, the Washington Post editorial board, a bunch of columnists on the left and the right and the center, all took issue with the pardon. Some continue to say the bad thing was the lying. Some continue to say the bad thing was the, giving up the high ground to Donald Trump. Some say the bad thing was undermining the rule of law, special treatment for families, the blanket nature of the pardon. People have all sorts of different views of why it was bad, but everybody thinks it was bad. There is a growing school of thought pushed by some close to Joe Biden that says the public doesn't care about this. It's an inside story. And by the end of this week, and certainly by the holidays, nobody's going to be talking about this or caring about it. It doesn't tarnish his legacy. It's just like a thing that happened. Dan, what's your view of that point of view, that this thing does not have a sustained import?
Well, I think there's two parts to that. I think on some level they're right that this story will itself kind of go by the wayside as Trump gets ready to take office. I think where it's going to be resurfaced early and often is it now gives the green light to Donald Trump to say, I'm going to pardon A, B, C, or D, because as Joe Biden said, the DOJ has been politicized. And so he totally undercut the Democratic Party's ability to say, no man is above the law, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it is, the more I read, the more kind of angry I get about this and just feel like it really is a fitting last chapter to what has been kind of a failed political leadership of Joe Biden as president. And I hate to say that, but the fact that the party is where it is, and this parting shot to basically protect his son, which I get, that is really the party's gonna have to clean this up. And it reminds me a little bit of when Bill Clinton pardoned Mark Rich and all the kind of, shenanigans that happened when he was leaving office. that it took the party a little bit to get out from under that. So it's too bad.
Sean, legs, no legs.
Oh, I think it's got legs because, I mean, I think Dan's right. We're on our side. I don't think you'll ever hear us stop talking about this pardon for a million reasons. I mean, the issue aspect of it, as I mentioned yesterday, guns and taxes, the precedent it sets for Donald Trump and every future person when it comes to pardons. I actually think that we've changed the nature of pardons, and you will see more blanket ones. I also think that, like, just as a reminder, I don't think this is the last pardon you're going to hear about from Joe Biden. And I don't think that Hunter Biden will be the last Biden pardon before Joe Biden. So that once this connective tissue exists between that pardon and the next one, it's going to continue to snowball. I don't think we've heard the last of this. This is going to be an issue that we will keep alive, and that I think, frankly, Biden will keep alive.
And can I just add one thing? Because I know there are a lot of Democrats that are like, this happens. One of the things that I think was really admirable for George W. Bush is he did not pardon Scooter Libby at the end of his term. It was very controversial. There was a feeling that, led by Dick Cheney, that like politics is politics. We can't leave a man on the battlefield. That was Cheney's term he kept using to Bush, that like, you got to pardon him and just move on because he happened to get caught. And Bush was like, no man is above the law. He's going to pay a price. I'm sorry. Like, it pains me. And I thought that was incredibly admirable of Bush and a great standard to set going forward. So for Democrats to say this always it's just not true. Anyway.
Sean was tweeting and not listening to you. So you
hello. I can multitask. I heard it's not good look for Democrats. I will always hear that. There's something about my ear. Anyone says Democrats doesn't look good, I go, what?
All right. Well, Sean continues to tweet. Dan, I want to ask you about this other topic. This other topic that grows out of this, out of several things, out of the election results, but also out of the debate about the pardon, which is some Democrats are saying, give me a break. Donald Trump is not going to lecture us on norms. We're about to go through 4 years of crisis and fire drills. Joe Biden can do whatever the F he wants in pardoning his son. And that the problem Democrats have is they're not tough enough. Is that the Democrats' problem, that they're not tough enough? Or is that one of many? Or is that a red herring? How do you feel about this notion that the only problem that Democrats have is they simply aren't tough enough? And Pluff, for instance, said that in the now famous Pod Save America interview. He said, Republicans coordinate their super PACs and break the law, and we listen to our lawyers because we're pansies. We need to be tougher. We need to just tell the lawyers, find a way to make this legal. What do you think of that, Dan?
By the way, Democrats pioneered working with outside groups in 2004. I'm sure if we brought Ken Moman on, he'd talk about the way that they, outsource stuff. But okay, separate issue. I do not think that the party's problem is it's not tough enough. I think Nancy Pelosi is plenty tough. I think the party's problem is an authenticity and a consistency problem, right? The problem isn't that Joe Biden, the pardon problem starts for Joe Biden with the fact that he kept saying, I won't do this, right? So then when you do it, anytime voters think you're not authentic and you're not consistent, they think you're weak. They think you're a wimp. And, Trump's genius, it may drive me and Democrats nuts, is he's like, I'm going to do it. F you, I'm going to do it. Let's have a fight because I'm going to do it. And then when I did it, I'm going to like plant the flag in the middle of the field for all those college football fans and like, come knock me off the logo if you don't like it, right? But he's consistent. He's an authentic brawler and street fighter. And the problem is Joe Biden, I mean, you go back to like, I'm going to run. Oh, no, I'm not, because it's time to pass the torch in July, right? And everyone like just says that's complete bullshit. You got crushed in the debate. Like, you need to get off the stage. So I think the party doesn't lack toughness. It just doesn't really know what it wants. And it has a really hard time being consistent these days. And that's why we look wimpy and weak.
Sean, before you answer, okay, Sean agrees. The Senate Republican X account just retweeted in quick succession tweets from Tommy Tuberville, Dan Sullivan, and Ted Cruz, and Marsha Blackburn, all praising Pete Hegseth with Marsha Blackburn going the furthest and saying he's an outstanding choice and talking about how great he'll be. So obviously that's a little bit pro forma.
So the base is still with them. That's a good sign.
Exactly. Sean, do you want to say anything more about this question of toughness?
I think that like, you know, I mean, Dan's right. I actually think as a Republican, the Democrats stick together a lot more than Republicans do. So I don't know. And impeaching a president twice, going after him in multiple cases from, you know, city to state to federal levels. I don't think anybody thinks that they were wallflowers when it came to going after Donald Trump and his allies. I mean, think about the suppression of the laptop, the Mueller I mean, there's endless amounts of effort to stop Trump and his allies.
When in my career, the losing side always says we have two problems. We are not as good at communicating, and we're not tough enough. And those are almost never the actual answers, but they're easy to say. Again, Democrats, I see you on here. Please raise your hand. I want to call on you in a moment to talk about this question of whether the issue for the party is not being tough enough.
And then
one more topic.
Mark, can I just add?
Yeah.
I don't think people at first, like the first month that Harris became the nominee, there was like grudging admiration that she is tough. Where she lost the tough mantle was when she started suddenly like, I'm now for fracking, even, and like, I'm not going to talk about it. Like, I'm, for immigrant, like, she kept changing positions kind of without really explaining it. And it looked so inauthentic and so phony. And then she didn't really want to talk to anybody and truly answer these questions. That's when she started to look weak. But at first, even Republicans were like, she's pretty tough, kind of smacking Trump around here, and he's on his heels.
Yeah. So. I think the other thing is that, remember, I hate to say this, but each of these questions is so easy. On her positions in 2019, all she had to say was, I was a senator from California. We have an interesting perspective on energy and As vice president, I've had the opportunity to visit Pennsylvania and recognize the important.
And I represent everybody now.
Right. I mean, it's just, these are not tough political questions. I've mentioned the Biden one in the past, how you separate yourself and show respect. These were layups. These were not outside the 3-point line shots. And the idea that you were blowing them to Dan, it's sort of like befuddlement, not even weakness.
Yeah, agreed. Democrats, we want to hear from you. Raise your hands. We'll get you in a moment. All right. Donald Trump did 4 things yesterday, at least 4 things, but 4 I'm going to list. And I want to make it a forward-looking question. Which of these 4 things, Sean will go first, which of these 4 things has the most impact going forward on America? Ready? Number 1, Donald Trump threatening, quote, hell to pay if the hostages in Gaza are not released. He didn't say against Hamas, but everybody's reading it that way. 2, the nomination of Arkansas billionaire Warren Stevens to be the U.S. ambassador to the United Kingdom. 3, Trump's trip to Paris for the reopening of Notre Dame this weekend. Or 4, Trump's reaffirmation of his opposition to Nippon Steel taking over U.S. Steel. Sean, which of those is the most cosmically significant going forward?
The visit to Notre Dame.
Because
I'm saying no. I'll
just give you a prediction on that.
I
predict he'll go to other. I know, but I'll give you a prediction. He'll go to other places in Europe. He won't just go to the island of the city and come back. All right, go ahead, Sean. Which of the 4? You need me to list them again?
So I think that potentially the statement about Gaza, the only thing I would say about the Nippon Steel thing is that really could have long-term consequences electorally, what happens in Pennsylvania. I mean, there's something really intriguing about how that plays out. But I would say in the short term, there's no question how he handles Gaza and the hostages, because that one is I mean, that's a massive deal. Do you send in special forces to extract these guys? Do you start a bombing campaign? But you also can't, there's nothing amorphous about that. With Nippon Steel, you can dance for a little while. That means on on January 20th at 12:01, you either go heavy in and send a SEAL team or an extraction team in, and start bombing, or nothing happens. But that's, to me, the most consequential, at least, no question about it.
Dan.
I think but I have a little different take than you guys. I think that he's a little afraid that this is going to land in his lap. Like, I think all the tough talk, yes, maybe if the hostages are released, he'll claim some credit. Like, okay, smart politics. I think he's terrified that if the hostages are still there and that war is going on, he owns it. Is the guy who has campaigned for 9 years on Iraq was a huge mistake. I'm getting us out of the wars and bringing people home. We need to make America great again. America first. His first month in office, are we going to bomb Iran and go in and start a war with Hamas? There's no way we're going to send in. I mean, it's Jimmy Carter all over. I mean, if it's not successful and there are dead U.S. soldiers and now we're in it, like we are in it.
One thing that
he wants this, I think he's full of it. He's afraid of this issue and he wants it. Oh, he wants it done. So he's going to talk super tough and flex. He's going to claim all the credit if anything happens. And if it doesn't, you're the president now.
Okay, so I don't disagree with the final analysis that he wants it over before he ends it in office. I will say this. Look at what he did on tariffs. He tweets out that he's going to institute a tariff immediately day one on China, Mexico, and Canada. And what happens? The Mexican president calls him on the phone and they have a beautiful conversation to address the issues on the southern border, at least according to his claim that, you know, she's going to address some issues. Trudeau.
Perfect conversation. It was perfect.
It was perfect. Just like Ukraine. Yeah. And then Trudeau flies down and has Thanksgiving with him. So the bottom line is, for all of the media bluster every time he does something, the guy gets results. This is like literally I think that if you are a foreign leader or embassy, go buy multiple copies of Art of the Deal and Art of the Comeback. He literally, I joke with everyone, he's the most transparent guy in the world. He tells you the plays before he calls them. And right now you've got Trudeau down there, and he literally joked with Trudeau about making Canada the 51st state, saying something to the effect of, I guess you'd rather be prime minister than governor. But like, he gets them realizing that you better act or I'm going to do something. It was awesome.
Well, the only thing is, Sean, look, I hear you, and I hope Trump is successful with what he's trying to do, right? He tried to strengthen America's hand to try to undo some of these imbalances. So I hope Trump is successful. However, there's no downside to claiming a successful meeting when you're not in power yet. Both sides have an incentive to say, we're going to keep talking. But as like the Bloomberg stories were saying late last week, once most people kind of went offline, China has started now to go at U.S. companies to say, oh, by the way, then, all right, you know what, some of the materials in your electronic products, we're going to say you can't do business with us anymore. Like I've said this before, it is not a one-way street. And I hear you, hopefully Canada and Mexico, Mexico takes the border crisis seriously. Hopefully Canada does what it needs to do. But when he's in office, we will see if immigration stops and if fentanyl stops coming into communities. And we will see if the Chinese, who have a huge domestic audience that they need to appease, they cannot look weak. They now have one dance with Trump that they can study and figure out how do we dance with him the second time. I think there's more to come on that. But I hear you. It is admirable that he is unafraid to, get in fights early.
Right. I mean, look, there's no question you're playing a game of chicken hoping you win, but he's willing to fight to get results. And I think that that's something that has been lacking right now.
Totally agree. Yep.
All right, folks, go to your questions, comments, starting with Diane and Kenneth, both of whom have decoded the key to getting called on the morning meeting or 2A tonight, which is to bring kids. The kids have disappeared. Bring them back or I'll mute you.
And I want to say, Kenneth is a Spicer enthusiast.
Yeah.
Sean, I mean, come on now.
All right. Diane, tell us a little bit about your sidekick.
This is my middle child. He's 2. So, Dominic.
Dominic, super cute, like the hair. Kenneth, unmute. Introduce Dominic to your little baby.
This is Chloe, and she wants to share her apple with the world.
It's a good apple, big as her head. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for joining and thank you for bringing the kids. We enjoy that. Diane, what's on your mind?
Well, a couple of things. The main thing is I just can't understand with the Hunter Biden pardon being so controversial. It's not really that surprising that he would do it, but why would he do it? Why wouldn't he just wait like everybody else till the very end of the term and kind of
I think he wanted to do it before the sentencing.
Okay.
Because once the sentencing happened, I think they had an indication that it was going to be a significant sentence, and I think they might have thought that was more of an affront. Also, I think they decided to do it, and they were afraid it would leak out, and Biden thought he could write a brilliant statement that would help control the narrative. Those would be my two thoughts.
I would say that just to be clear, though, because I think it's a great question that you're asking in terms of the timing. There's also another option, which is he could have commuted the sentences, right? Which would have not looked. I mean, and then on January 20th, on the way out the door, done the pardon. I mean, so there is a two-step that could have happened here, and that's why I continue to believe that more's coming down the pike. I mean, this 11-year blanket pardon definitely raised a lot of questions. And I think what you're asking is what I think is on the mind of a lot of people in terms of, okay, the sentencing's coming down. I think on the 12th was the first case. You could have easily commuted the sentence and maintained your stance on rule of law and said, I don't want, as a father, I didn't want him to suffer. And I thought he was being politically persecuted, and therefore I'm commuting the sentence. But
see, and I think that if he would have gotten a significant sentence, that would have been the best political cover, and he wouldn't have had to done anything like that. He could have just said, look, I'm an old man. I've missed a lot of things in my 50 years of service in my personal life, and I'd like to spend the last few years with my son. So I just think, like, in terms of the politics of it or his legacy, it just looks the worst now.
Yeah, Diane, Joe Biden,
that's the best statement I've heard.
Yeah, Diane, it's a great idea, but Joe Biden starts no sentence with "I'm an old man."
Well, he should.
Diane, stand by. Kenneth, what's on your mind?
Well, I thought that the biggest surprise with the Hunter Biden pardon was that Karine Jean-Pierre showed up to work on Monday, to be honest with you.
Well, she was still on Air Force One, so.
Well, I just thought after, months of insisting that he would not, pardon his son, I was really shocked. I thought she was going to resign, to tell you the truth, but it just feels like kind of an extension of the Kamala campaign in the sense of, I never had a doubt that he was going to pardon his son, because what good or what father honestly wouldn't, but the fact that they insisted for months that it wouldn't happen, it's just, I think that it feels like an extension of the Kamala campaign in the sense of they weren't being genuine, and now that he has nothing to lose because he's going to be out of power in a couple of months, it's like, just do it. It's just not being hidden, right? Like, it's just there for the world to see.
Yeah, that's true. Dan, any comments?
I mean, I think, first, I think what Diane said really would have been the best thing to say. I mean, whether he's saying I'm old or not, it's just, I want to spend, time with my son. He's an addict, and I'm doing this, and kind of, you want to be tough? F you, right? Like, I'm going into the sunset. But I think to Kenneth's point, it is the inconsistency and the loss of the ability for Democrats to talk about the rule of law and no man is above it. And the fact that Biden went at his own DOJ and said this is completely political. And basically, I mean, I don't know why he didn't just use the word witch hunt. I mean, that was all that was missing from that statement, right? And it just makes me want to bang my head into a wall.
It opens, and I agree with what you said, because now it opens up the door. I mean, the fact that he's in power and it's his DOJ, the fact that he said that it was essentially politically motivated, that just opens the floodgates now for Trump, who, I think, if you're objective, you feel like the stuff that has been going on is politically motivated, but now he's got a precedent.
Yep.
And you're just further eroding institutions. I mean, that's kind of what breaks my heart a little bit. I mean, not that they're all pure, and, every institution, particularly in DC, has bad apples. But the fact that he now, if you're a person who doesn't pay too much attention, and you hear what Trump says, you hear what Democrats have said, and you kind of aren't sure, and now you hear the Democratic president say they're completely political, why have faith in the institutions now? And that is troubling as a country, I think.
Diane, did you want to raise something else?
Well, in terms of Joni, I thought the same thing, but I think the issue for her is that Iowa is not lukewarm on Trump. even people who are not really conservative, there's some Trump voters in there that are very moderate. And I think she'll have a hard time, justifying that decision as a representative of Iowans versus just what she wants to do.
Yeah. Thank you both.
Thank
you both for coming. Hope the kids have a great holiday, and hope you do as well. But please come back regularly and bring the kids always. All right, Sue and Dan, come on in together. And Sue first, then Dan. Floor is yours. What do you guys want to say about all this?
Can you
or
hear
anything
me?
else on your mind?
Yeah,
we can. Thank you for coming.
I agree with a lot of what Dan has been saying about Biden and the Hunter pardon. I'm not surprised at all. I think his statement was ridiculous. He should have just told the truth. The reason he's pardoning his son is because Trump and everybody Trump is appointing is saying he's going to go after the Bidens and everybody else in his administration. I expect there'll be a lot more pardons coming along that are similar because I think he wants to protect his family and protect his staff. It does set a terrible precedent. I wish Joe Biden would just go away. Looking back to the summer when he was saying, "Oh, I'm not going to pardon him," he was still in the race. He kept saying, "I'm going to win." I think he changed his mind when the election came on because he didn't win and she didn't win. So, he's trying to protect his son. That's the justification. That's what he should have said. I just truly wish he would just fade into the sunset, go to Delaware and stay there. It's just like he keeps stepping in it.
Who do you consider the leaders of the party now, and who would you like the leaders of the party to be?
Good question. I want the current leaders that are like, I would love Schumer to not be the leader in the Senate. Nancy Pelosi stepped aside. Please, I respect her, but please step aside. I don't think you can pick anybody who's in Congress right now who's a leader. I am not a Bernie fan. I'm not an Elizabeth Warren fan. AOC,
How about your governor and your senior senator?
I think Jared Polis is great. I really do. He does great things for Colorado. He speaks his mind. I don't think America is ready for a soft-spoken, in a way, gay married man to be president of the United States. I think the Democrats, when they look forward to 2028, have to be very strategic. I don't think they should run another woman. There's a lot of people that I like who I think could take on the mantle. I just think it's too soon. Gavin Newsom is very strong, very personable, very well-spoken, but very liberal. I don't know who he would appeal to. I love Pete Buttigieg. I think he's one of the best spokespeople the Democrats have. But again, I don't know that America is ready for a gay man. I don't think you could get a lot of conservatives to support him. Originally, I thought Governor Pritzker from Illinois, he's done great things in Illinois. He comes across as a very strong leader. I read something someplace that people think big men, they just project strength. So, I mean, I really don't know at this point. I think.
Okay, stand by, Sue. Dan, floor is yours. Thoughts on all this?
Yeah, before I was in the camp of, the Democrats, they go low, we go high. That game's over. I think the Dems got to play politics like the Republicans do and just win.
Scorched.
Just win.
So what's an example? What's an example of something from the campaign where they didn't do that, where they should have?
Oh gosh, I mean, I mean, I can't think of anything right now. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of examples, but
okay. What's an example of something going forward? That's okay. What's an example of something forward that would illustrate what you want them to do?
I mean, just, like this whole thing with him pardoning his son. Everyone knew he was going to do it, and the Democrats shouldn't apologize for it. Just, the Republicans elected a convicted felon, traitor to this country. Nothing matters anymore. Just win. That's it. It's simple. That's the way I see it now.
All right, either of you have a question. Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
I mean, I think the one challenge, Dan, is that we said we weren't going to do this. So Trump, I believe, no, but look, I believe that what Trump would have done is said, like, I haven't thought about it. That's an interesting question. Like, he would dodge saying, I'm not going to pardon, and then he would plant the flag and pardon and like go guns a-blazing. It's just the fact that Biden said, and the party rallied around, and everybody was on this message. No man is above the law. We're going to stand by it. And it's a contrast to Trump. And if we're trying to rebuild trust with voters, they just look at us and say, like, yeah, Trump's a felon and everything, but that was known. Like, he didn't apologize.
Voters just want our side to win on our side. We just got to win. And that's it. And then, I mean, that's what it's come to. He said he was going to pardon all the January 6ers.
Dan, do you think that you guys aren't tough enough? Do you think you're not tough enough?
No, we're weak. We apologize for everything. We throw each other under the bus. Yep. And that's all got to stop. We got to play the GOP's game. Stop. They're winning.
Stop planting flags. Stop making these statements. It's ridiculous, because one thing, the toughness issue, whether the Democrats are tough enough or not, I think one reason they're not viewed as tough, I mean, obviously Biden has a lot of weaknesses. I mean, I don't even want to start on his, physical stuff and covering that up. That's why I left the Democratic Party and became an unaffiliated voter. But just stop with the trying to be so diplomatic and appeal to all sides. I mean, just come out and say what you want to do, and honestly, get rid of everybody in leadership who was over the age of 70. I can say that. I'm over 70. Get rid of them. Move on. New generation.
And the Democrats are horrible on messaging. I mean, we had a lot of wins, a lot of legislative wins, and we didn't sell it. And we didn't own it. We let Fox News and all the Republicans steal the narrative on everything.
Can I just say, Dan,
Dan's got to just play to win.
I think what's interesting always is, and I mean, Dan Turrentine, Dan one, brought this up earlier, but I think that the other side always has this vision of the other side. I mean, I get a kick, and I'm being serious about this. When you say that you're not fighting hard enough, I'm going, I can't, I mean, I really do believe you threw the kitchen sink and then some plumbing underneath it at Trump. You guys dominate Hollywood, the mainstream media, government, academia, corporate America. And I mean, every Republican was canceled. We had DEI and wokeness. I mean, I just don't see from my side. I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. Because if that wasn't fighting, I mean, I am a little concerned about what's next. But you have the idea. I mean, Schiff was out there. They had a clip yesterday of him saying a couple of years back that any president, because of course when Trump was in office, he introduced legislation that if you pardoned a family member, you had to provide a report to Congress on the merits of and now complete silence. You've got a media that literally is accusing Republicans of calling Biden a liar when they were the ones that perpetuated this, have stood silent for this. I mean, that's why I'm so intrigued by your stance, because I'm going, I don't understand how the folks on the left, I get maybe, and this gets back to the bigger, broader point that we keep talking about. You had a bad candidate. She was horrible at communicating the basics that the American people cared about. And yet the issue that you don't fight enough just doesn't resonate with me.
The people that are fighting Adam Schiff.
What's your definition of a bad candidate?
Well, I mean, look, I think though, to take what both of you guys are saying. Take the issue of Israel. What are we for? Like, you want to win? What are we for? We were for, 1 minute we're saying Netanyahu's got to stop. We're threatening to cut it. And then the next minute we're like, we're shipping you all the arms you want.
Yeah.
Okay, immigration. We are for getting rid of ICE. We're for reforming everything. 2 years later, without explanation, we are basically where Trump is. Which are we? So it's not a question of are we tough? I think we're not authentic and we're not consistent. So vote like anyone in our life. If you're not authentic and you're not consistent, we're saying you're a wimp. You're just weak. And that's where she is a bad candidate. Right.
Trump,
Jared Polis.
Hold on, Dan,
for example.
Dan, hold on, because Sue was talking and got interrupted. Sue, go ahead.
A couple things. Dan, one, exactly, trying to please both sides.
Yep.
With Israel, with the border and everything else. And Sean, to your point, you're talking about Adam Schiff, you're talking about Elizabeth Warren. You're assuming that for most people that are Democrats or were Democrats, that those are the people that we want to listen to. Honest to goodness, if Elizabeth Warren comes on and I'm watching the news, I switch the channel. I don't want to hear. I'm tired of hearing from people who, again, I don't think it's authentic because they don't take the stance, the hard stance. It's like the speech in Congress when, you get up there and it's Chuck Schumer talking about something and then Mitch McConnell comes up. Mitch McConnell's statement seems so much stronger than Chuck Schumer's because he's trying to please everybody. You can't please everybody. And they didn't sell the legislation. And Sean, how many Republicans voted against the infrastructure bill and then have gone out to their districts and said, oh, isn't this great because we're getting all this money? So many of them are doing
what one of the most fascinating things is, the New York Times had a great story about all the inroads Trump made in New York City. And it showed a demographic heat map. The area of New York City that Trump improved the most was Corona, Queens. Do you know who the member of Congress is that had her best outcome? AOC. What do they have in common? They're authentic fighters. You may not like AOC, but she is unapologetic. She is everywhere. She speaks in English. She is clear. She's unafraid to F-bomb it, right? Both of them were successful with the same voters. It's not if it's not the candidate.
AOC 2028.
Well,
all right, Dan and Sue, thank you both for coming. Please come back regularly. Appreciate it. All right, let's bring in another pair because I think our pairs are working for us well. Let's go to Jeff and Richard. Jeff, Richard, tell folks a little bit about yourselves, where you are, your thoughts on everything. Let's start with Richard.
Hey, Trump supporter from South Florida. Beautiful weather here today. And low of 52, high of 69. In terms of foreign policy and Trump's tweet about the hostages, there's been two main narratives. It's that Israel has the right to defend itself and we have to free the hostages. So either this is a hostage rescue operation or it's not. And the longer he sits with the situation, the more like kryptonite it is. So I think having the goal to free the hostages and end the war is a good one.
Okay, thank you. Stand by. Jeff.
Yes, reluctant Trump supporter. Would like to have had more choices. Living in Maine, it's colder than where Richard is today. And I sense the conversation's moving a little bit away from the pardon, but I want to get 2 cents in on that.
You take it anywhere you want.
Okay. As a parent of a 20-year sober child who's very much an adult now and a successful adult, my initial reaction.
To you both.
Thank you. My initial reaction to the news on Sunday was somewhat visceral, given that I tend to be a little right of center. And all the conversation that's gone on this morning, But then I took 24 hours and I thought about it and said, maybe there's a more human element that I would look at here. One is maybe Joe Biden has essentially risked his entire legacy with this to save his son. And what father wouldn't at least make that part of a calculus in looking at the situation? But then I'll go back to my political roots here and say, don't discount the fact that perhaps Joe Biden gave his own party the middle finger for having them ejected him essentially from a race that we all here on this platform know he would have had great difficulty winning, if any chance at all. But I'm not sure in his heart he still felt that he could lose this election. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, okay. My wife had the same thought you did this morning. She thought the same thing you did. He gave the middle finger to the party.
Yeah.
Jeff,
gentlemen, go ahead,
maybe more middle fingers to come. Who knows?
Yeah.
Jeff, we talked about this yesterday.
Holidays.
I think that like any parent would do what they could for their child. That's not, and I agree with you. But I think Mark made a really interesting point yesterday, which is you ran for president knowing this, right? That he was going to be an issue, that his business dealings were going to be an issue. That's number one. Number two is that you were adamant. I mean, it's not like he just found out about Hunter's addiction issues.
True.
Right. So he has been up until November 7th, he gave that ABC interview. He knew that Hunter had a problem. He knew he had been sober and for X years. He knew the crimes that he had committed. And yet he still remained adamant that he believed in the rule of law and the judiciary system and the jury process. And so there was never an equivocation that, so to suddenly wake up one day and be like, my son was targeted. Whoa, where did this come from? That's where I think he lost the credibility. No one would have from day one, if he had said, look, I'm going to let this process play out. But, as as a loving father, I'm always going to kind of whatever. He could have found some weasel way of saying it, but he didn't. And that's the problem. I think that frankly, I think it's worse. You're copping out. You've known your son has issues, and now you're suddenly throwing this out there like, oh, he was, attacked. I mean, give me a break.
No, and frankly, during these 4 years, when he looked in the mirror and envisioned himself as an FDR president, my strong opinion is he wasn't any of that. And so this may be what historians will note 10 years from now. This isn't a Mark Rich thing. This is bigger than that.
Guys, let me ask you: Are there any nominees for any of the jobs by President Trump? I'm switching back now to Trump. Are there any nominees that you think are ill-advised and you wish were pulled down?
Well, you had to pull me off the ceiling when you nominated Matt Gaetz. I'm glad he's gone.
Yeah. How about the remaining ones? Are there any you'd rather not necessarily pick a big fight over it, but just say, Mr. President, quietly take that one off?
Yeah, I think is it Hegerich for defense? I think he's got a real problem on his hands.
Yeah. Which aspects of his background trouble you?
I think probably the sexual harassment charges that have come and gone over there. I don't think I think Congress the Republicans want to support Trump, but they're not going to be patsies on any of this stuff. I don't think.
Are you enthusiastic about Kash Patel, about Pam Bondi?
No,
about
Pam
Bobby
Bondi,
Kennedy?
yes. I mean, if nothing else, and she's a non-Matt Gaetz. But
how about Kash Patel and Bobby Kennedy?
I've been reading about Bobby Kennedy. I think he'll get approved, but I'm not sure how long.
Forget whether he will or not. Would you like to see him in the job?
It might be. I mean, these are cabinet members. These aren't going to be working day-to-day operations down there. I think it'd be interesting to try him. I don't know.
Okay.
Again,
Richard,
his longevity in the post.
Okay. Richard, how do you feel about the choices? Are any of them you'd rather see step aside?
I was under the impression that adultery and financial mismanagement was a long-standing tradition in Washington, D.C. So I don't see why it's a controversial pick. But I'm not a big fan of foreign
it's all
politics,
relative.
but
It's all
Richard's
relative.
suggesting it's a qualification.
Richard, did you just say you're not a fan of his foreign policy picks?
Yeah, I think it's a bit war hawkish from Rubio, Stefanik. Some of that stuff worries me, but maybe it plays to his hands, and I don't know. I don't know, maybe it works out, but it's a bit hawkish for me.
Yeah. Gentlemen, how'd you find out about two-way?
I was a long-standing religious watcher of the circus, and I rediscovered you when you broke the news on the Kamala coup on X.
Okay,
I've been
Jeff.
with you. I've been with you way back. I know you still do Wednesday morning appearances on another radio show, and that's where I picked you up initially. I've been following you steadily ever since.
You can say Smirkanish. It's not like Trump is still scared.
All right.
You can say that. Well, gentlemen, glad to have you here and appreciate the conversation. We hope you'll come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right. So occasionally we like to open the mailbag. And the mailbag this week comes from a great tweet. It came from England. Go ahead and put that up. This is a tweet praising us, which we're glad to hear. American politics is a nauseating thing to follow closely. Mark Halperin, Sean Spicer, and Dan Turrentine over at Two-Way make it look a lot less so. For me, a Brit with aspirations of one day making the move across over the pond, they embody the unique charm of the American people. And there's my response. Sean embodies the unique charms of the people of Rhode Island. Sean, I want to give you an opportunity to respond, even though you've been tweeting up a storm throughout the program. As best I can tell, you haven't responded to that tweet except for saying wicked.
Dude, that's what we say. That's
good.
like
I know.
I know that Jeff has probably ventured down a little, but that says a lot in New England.
Yeah.
When you just say wicked.
I mean no disrespect to the three of us when I say that I'm a little troubled that someone in England thinks we represent America. That seems off key.
Kind of true.
Yeah. All right. I had one parting question for the twos of you, as we say. When President Biden eventually takes a question on the pardon, what should he say? Sean.
Come on, folks. No joke. I love my son. I mean, so Joey, like my uncle used to say, Joey, family first. No joke, folks.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear Dana Carvey this weekend. I have a feeling Saturday Night Live is going to have a little fun with this one.
Are they back this week?
Oh, or maybe next week. They may do a special episode.
I used to know that. I used to know when they were live.
Yeah, I think they might be back. All right, Dan, what should he say?
I would go back to what our guest said a few minutes ago. I mean, I would just say, maybe not that I'm an old man, but I couldn't bear to spend the rest of my life with my son potentially behind bars and risk him relapsing. And I know it's not, it's controversial, and I know it's going to be a tarnish potentially on my legacy. But as a father, it's all worth it. Like, I think every American would say, okay, let's move on.
By the way, you saw that yesterday, Corinne Jean-Pierre, maybe she's watching the morning meeting because she started to go down the path of Donald Trump and attacks on the family, and they walked her back because they don't want to go down that path, which is really interesting because I actually think that's not that I think it's true, but I do think that like that would have been the smarter political move, and yet they won't go there.
Yeah.
I have another question, Mark. Do you think Biden will speak to the media before he leaves?
Yeah, he will. He'll do some gaggle. There are four people we haven't heard from who have critical and unique insight into both the conduct of the investigations and the timing of prosecutorial decisions. That is Jack Smith, the Deputy Attorney General, the Attorney General, and I'm blanking on the name of the U.S. Attorney from Delaware. What's that guy's name?
Wow.
Who prosecuted Hunter? Anyway, those four, we haven't really gotten an explanation from them. And normally prosecutors only argue in court, and I totally get why they do that. But I'm super curious if we ever hear from those four about how they made the decisions they made. The Attorney General went pretty slow. Lisa Monaco, the deputy, they went pretty slow in the Trump prosecutions. The Hunter prosecutions, David Weiss, thank you. The Hunter prosecutions started slow, but David Weiss flipped from being seemingly willing to give Hunter a sweetheart plea deal, only letting the statute of limitations lapse, only charging him with certain crimes, to then when the plea deal fell apart, becoming extremely aggressive. And I know that's one thing that confused the Biden family. So I'm super curious to see if we ever hear from those four, because as I said, they've got unique insight into what happened, and without them, we'll never know.
And do they leave before January 3rd? Do those people so that they're not called to testify as in their current capacity.
Yeah, although they can be called even if they're gone. And I'll be super curious to see. Gentlemen, great to see you. Sean, keep us updated on the tree, of course, throughout the day, continuing live coverage on X, and then tomorrow, potentially the big exclusive here on the morning meeting. I'll be back at 6 Eastern time tonight for a little program we like to call Two-Way Tonight. Got a certain ring to it. And we have some special guests unannounced at this time, but you won't want to miss it. And the three of us, of course, will be back in 23 hours right here on the morning meeting. Gentlemen, as we say in Australia, good day.
Right.